Hey, it's Scott Petrak with another episode of the Brown Zone Coverage Podcast. The NFL world is headed to Indianapolis next week for the scouting combine, and it's a big one for the Browns. After 3 years without a first-round pick, they have the number 2 selection. Quarterbacks and other draft prospects won't be the only topic of discussion. The Myles Garrett trade request will be a focus, and Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski will be asked about it publicly for the first time. Here to discuss, as always, is Dave Chudowsky of the WKYC Morning News. Hey, Chud.
Hey, Scott. How's it going, buddy? Nice job on your Super Bowl prediction. This is our
I
first time talking. You were all over that, my man.
tell you what, that's got to be a first where I nailed it before the season. It just has to be.
That's got to be a great feeling, right? I mean, well, I do know what that feeling feels like. But I've done it with the Chiefs. Like that last year, that's not really going out on a limb as much as you did. I have to say that picking the Eagles, and maybe it's a blind spot for me, like I mentioned last time, but the more I look at the Eagles, I'm just like, what was I thinking? Like, wow, they are very impressive, and now you're even wondering, can they continue to dominate in the future, right? And Saquon Barkley, obviously, I underestimated that, but the Chiefs really took care of him in the Super Bowl. That's what makes them so dangerous. They pretty much stop. I don't know if stop's the word, but they held him in check, and they're able to get that passing game going. And obviously, Mahomes making mistakes, we just don't see that
Right.
the interceptions like that. So that was the story of the game.
Yeah, the only surprise for me was that, well, it's not the only one. Mahomes, Mahomes doesn't miss passes like that very often. And I felt like, for sure, the interceptions, which are obvious, but then you also had some third down and maybe even a fourth down throw or two where he just wasn't accurate. And he bounced a couple balls. And I think the early pressure and the consistent pressure from that Eagles pass rush, which he did just with their front four, got bothered him. And we see that with the best quarterbacks. If you can pressure a guy and hit him early and hit him off, and it messes with their rhythm, it messes with their accuracy. And we saw that from Mahomes. He just did not play his best game, and that led to the blowout. And that's to me the biggest surprise. I would not have predicted in any world that kind of a lopsided outcome. And it reminded everybody of the old Super Bowls, right? When we were younger, we used to see that kind of
Yeah.
game a lot. And I guess it also just reinforced that turnovers are huge in every game, especially the Super Bowl. And if a team plays really poorly against a really good team playing well, then this could happen. Because, if you played 10 games, the Eagles might blow out the Chiefs once. And we just happened to see that game. But it also shows that I think the best roster in football won. And the fact that the Chiefs had to devote so many resources to stopping Saquon allowed Jalen Hurts to have one-on-one opportunities on the outside, and he took advantage of them all day long.
Yeah. It was, the Chiefs, and they just looked beat down, like it's very rare do you see them basically, I don't know if I want to say they gave up, but they certainly had a different look about them. Definitely definitely not something we're accustomed to.
No doubt. You saw, I think you saw them realize this is not us, and it's getting away from them, and then it kept getting away. And I think we talked about it ahead of time, so now obviously it's impossible to quantify. But I do think the pressure of the going for the three-peat had an impact. And maybe not, maybe it's all about the offensive line, but I think that just weighs on you, and they were able to overcome it all year long. But when it really weighs on you is when the three-peat is in front of you, one game away. And I'm convinced that was a factor.
Yeah, and when I was watching the game, I thought about that because you made a big deal about
I
that, and
did.
I lightheartedly made a little fun of you, but I don't know, whatever. But no, you were on the ball, man. Nice job picking the Eagles to win it all from the beginning of the year. You deserve the props on that. Again, not really a great game, but we moved to the Browns, and when you see the Eagles, you just the funny thing is the Browns didn't feel like they were that far off from the Eagles when they played them, but when you watch the Eagles in the Super Bowl, you think, man, the Browns are just miles away from that.
Yeah, I think that's always how it looks. But it's hard. It's impossible to argue any other way. I mean, they're 3-14. They don't have the depth of talent across the roster that the Eagles do. Obviously, they don't have their quarterback like the Eagles do in Jalen Hurts. So that makes all the difference. And I think it's another reminder about the importance of the offensive and defensive lines. And we always know that those are all important, but you forget about it. You focus on, or you never forget about it, but it leaves the forefront of your mind. And it's a lot of focus on skill position players and how many receivers you have and who's your running back. And obviously those things matter, but the trenches matter a ton. And that's why the Eagles are so good. That's where Howie Roseman, their GM, invests so many resources across both the offensive and defensive fronts. And I think that's important to remember as we talk about the draft and free agency, how the Browns go about building those. I mean, are they losing the best defensive player in football with Myles Garrett? So that would go against everything. If you're trying to build the best defensive line, and that's the way to beat the best quarterbacks, how do you let Myles Garrett out the door? So all those things come about when you watch the Eagles. But the biggest message is offensive and defensive lines, and then nailing draft pick after draft pick and the correct trades and free agent signings that Howie Roseman has been spectacular, but especially last year. He drafted 2 rookie corners that started in the Super Bowl, and one of them had a pick six. So, and that's only part of the draft haul that he had. The defensive line is a bunch of a bunch of early round draft picks, especially those 2 D tackles that have such a big influence. So the Browns haven't had those first round picks, but even the picks they've had, Andrew Berry has been less successful than Howie Roseman, and that's a big reason why the gap in talent is what it is.
All right. Well, I would have started with this, but had to give you your props for the Super Bowl since we didn't talk last week, which, by the way, thanks for the week off. That wouldn't have had anything to do with maybe you enjoying yourself somewhere, would it have been?
No, a little bit, but I didn't leave until the end of last week. So I did go to Hilton Head and played some golf. Just got back late last night. We're recording this Thursday. But yeah, I mean, I had some stuff going on. Plus, there wasn't a ton that happened in the Browns world. So I said, hey, let's give Chud 1 week off.
Yeah, thanks. I could use it actually, but more on that later.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah. So the lead story is Myles Garrett, and it's just talk radio's out of control. The articles, he went on, but just Super Bowl rampage, what it seemed like. But Scott, it's definitely hasn't gotten better, and it just seems like we are in a, I don't know what the word is. I mean, two worlds that are far apart in what they want, or at least one of the worlds might make you think they want. I'm not sure, but where are we at with Myles Garrett?
Yeah, it's interesting, Judd. I think, well, I was going to say I think things will calm down for a little bit, but actually they won't because we got the scouting combine coming up. So I don't think Myles will be as out front as he was at the Super Bowl. That's the time for players to be in front of a million cameras, a million microphones. And he took advantage of that in his quest to, he was promoting a product, but it was also his quest to get himself out of the Browns and to put some pressure on them to make a trade. Now, the organization's been steadfast that it does not want to trade Myles and has no plans to trade Myles. And I don't think it will be easy to move him off that plan. Now, if they get blown away by trade offer, I could see that happening. We talked about this before. If they decide to go on a rebuild, then that's the first major step of a rebuild is trading Myles Garrett because you can load up, you would think, on draft picks and you get younger and those things. But that's not what they're inclined to do. And I don't see that changing. But if it's going to change, and if it's going to change in a hurry, the combine is where you could really see some movement. And that's because the NFL world is there. It's in Indianapolis. Andrew Berry will have talks with his counterpart GMs. Maybe he gets trade offers. And teams really begin to finalize their offseason plans at this time of the season or at this time of the year because free agency starts March 10th. That's when the negotiating period opens, and then March 12th is when the league year starts, and you can actually sign free agents and make trades officially. So if you're a team like Washington, for example, just looking to trade for Myles Garrett and build its defense to go along with the outstanding offense, and you got your quarterback, Jaden Daniels, you want to do that at the beginning of free agency. And if you don't have Myles Garrett, then you probably move on, and maybe you talk to the Bengals about trading for Trey Hendrickson, or you talk to other teams, or you take the best free agent pass rusher out there, whatever it is. And so I think that is a key kind of milepost along this journey of the offseason and Myles Garrett, and will he or won't he be traded somewhere else? Obviously, then the draft is the next big piece. But, so the teams, a lot of teams want to know going into the draft whether or not they're going to have the core or their defensive end. And they want to know before free agency. So I'm not saying something will happen at the combine, but if something were going to happen, this would be the first, I would say, the first opportunity for the Browns to really be serious and talk to teams about a deal. But like I said, I don't see any inclination from them. And I think my feeling is this is going to drag on, Chud. And at some point, the Browns are going to try to convince Garrett to stay and to rescind the request and convince him that they're going to be better in 2025 and that they're going to pay him a bunch of money and see if that works, as opposed to acquiescing to his request and trading him.
But Scott, you bring up the money, and everyone keeps talking about that. Oh, they could give him this, more money, more money. But he's made it clear it's not about the money. It's about winning and where he's at in his career. So how could that change then?
Well, yeah, that's a great point, John. Here's the scenario that I envision for Myles Garrett to return, and that is the Browns draft a quarterback at number 2. They sign a veteran before that. I don't know who that is. I don't know if it matters if you're drafting a quarterback at number 2, because you would think that quarterback would play pretty early. But let's go with the probably scenario A. You sign Kirk Cousins in free agency. You sign another player or two. You add a receiver that you think can complement Jerry Jeudy. Maybe you sign another pass rusher to give Myles Garrett some help. Now, I don't think they're going to make a bunch of moves and a bunch of big moves because they don't have a ton of salary cap space, but they have more because I just hit my dog in the head as I went to pet her. Is their salary cap is going to raise $22 million from last year to this year. That's the estimate. So they have more flexibility than they would have if there weren't a big jump in the salary cap. So my point is, you make this argument to Myles Garrett where, hey, we got better quarterback, we got better at defensive line, you got better wide receiver. We're going to draft a quarterback at number 2, and we really believe in this guy. We're going to draft a left tackle at 33, draft a running back in the 4th round, and paint him this picture and show him this blueprint that says we can be a team that wins 10 or 11 games in 2025. And I wrote a column about that this week, or at the end of last week, about comparing it to the Broncos. The Broncos didn't have a great roster. They gave up on Russell Wilson, took a huge salary cap hit, drafted Bo Nix, the 6th quarterback drafted in the 1st round last year, and went and won 10 games and made the playoffs. And I don't think it's a stretch to think the Browns can do that. I think their roster is as good or better than Denver. So I think you make that pitch to Myles Garrett. You say, we have the next Jaden Daniels, whether it's Cam Ward or Shadir Sanders. And then on top of that is, here's a giant contract that makes you the highest paid defensive player in the history of the NFL. And I think that's the pitch you need to make to Garrett. He could still decline that and say that's not enough, but I think that's what the Browns need to do and will do.
Yeah, so I'm trying to soak that all in with what you just said, but at the end of the day, it sounds okay. But at the end of the day, if you're Myles Garrett, do you just say, all right, that's fine, but you're still the Browns, and you haven't proven that you could do this besides the 1 year that we went to the playoffs. But really, since you've come back to the NFL, you guys have not figured this out. Why would I give up my last couple prime years to see if you could figure it out when you just haven't been able to.
Yeah, I mean that's fair, and that's obviously where Myles has gotten to, because it was a substantial shift of opinion where he had been, I'm going to Cleveland my whole career, and then that switched with the trade request. Now, the other part of it is I think Myles still would prefer it to work here. And you saw like David Njoku talk to people at the Super Bowl and say he's going to try to convince him to stay. And I know that's a feeling among his teammates that they want him to stay. So maybe that has an influence on Garrett. And then the other big part of it is, Chud, is, he's under contract for 2 more years. So he doesn't have all the leverage here. And it could come to a point where he has to make a decision. Do I want to try to make this as ugly as possible? And that's with a hold in or a hold out or whatever it is. Keep talking about wanting to be traded. All those things that would go along with trying to force the Browns' hand, maybe even from a public relations standpoint. So I think there's a lot of stages to go through. If the Browns truly don't want to trade Myles Garrett, then I think there's a lot of stages that have to be gone through, especially by Garrett, to get to the point where he can actually force a trade. And the fact is, he's under contract, so he can't unless the Browns cave. So I think those are the reasons. I think all that contributes to why he could come back.
Yeah, and the thing is, Scott, one thing that kind of bothers me is like he signed this contract. I mean, like, I don't know. I hear a lot of people that like feel sorry for him or feel like, oh, well, I don't blame Myles Garrett for wanting to leave the Browns. Well, I mean, and we've talked about this before, you're making millions of dollars in the NFL, and you did sign this contract, and I mean, this is what you signed up for. I get it, you're not happy, but listen, I mean, they don't have to trade you, and what if trading you puts them in a worse spot? I mean, it's not just so simple.
Exactly. And I think that's one of the biggest reasons the Browns don't want to trade Garrett. Besides, you trade you trade away a Hall of Fame player, it's just bad for the organization. It's bad for the GM. It's bad for everybody. It just looks awful. So you have that. But the other aspect is, I don't think they can get requisite value for Myles Garrett, like appropriate value. And let's say you trade him to the contender he wants to go to. Then you're talking about draft picks that are at the bottom of every round, wherever you're getting the pick. First round, second round, doesn't matter. In best case scenario is 3 number ones, and I don't think they're getting 3 number ones. So even if you get those and you get the 29th, 30th, and 27th pick the next 3 years, are those players going to ever equal Myles Garrett? I would argue no. And I'd say certainly not in the short term if you're trying to win in 2025. So that's another reason not to do it. And your point about, yeah, he signed the contract, I think that's valid. And obviously he is contractually obligated to play for this team for the next 2 years unless they decide to trade him. But there's a couple sides to that. Is you can think when you sign the contract, hey, we're on the up and up, and we just went to a playoff game or whatever it is, and we're going to be good. And then the reality is, like 3 or 4 years later, you're like, man, we're still not any better. We still don't have a quarterback. The situation has changed in Garrett's mind, certainly. And, it's the old, well, the team can trade him at any time. So if the Browns decided without Myles' trade request that they're going to go on a big rebuild, and the first piece of the rebuild is to trade Myles Garrett, which plenty of people speculated about before his trade request, then he's got no recourse because he signed a contract and they could trade him. So I see the player side of it, and I don't think the players should be necessarily forced to stay with the team that they don't want to be with, but he is under contract. So I think it's a difficult situation, and it's up to the Browns to make Myles not want to leave. I guess that's the bottom line.
Well, what's the point of a contract then? I mean, it's like that in a lot of different.
But he signs a contract with the team that I'm going to play with you for the next 5 years, and then the team could trade him at any point. And I get that's the way the business works. But if we're talking about loyalty, then the loyalty can't be just one-sided.
Yeah, that's fair. I'll give you that. That's a good that's what we're here for, Scott, is back and forth. All right. So you
Exactly.
can, yeah, keep me in line when I make a not such a great point. You win that one. I'll give you that. Yeah, I don't know. Let's put an end to Garrett though. But are you a little surprised at how he's acting? And do you think maybe fans are, I don't know, not necessarily taking the Brown side, but they've moved further away from his side after the way he's handled this?
Yes, I think there's certainly been a shift in the public perception of Garrett after he went on that run of talk shows or TV appearances and podcast appearances during the Super Bowl in New Orleans. And Chud, you were the one of the first guys that brought that to my attention, that really was changing people's opinions. And it's been widespread. I've talked to several people that has had an impact. Him openly flirting with the Washingtons and Philadelphias of the world bothered fans. And I get that. I also think that that's kind of part of this. And once you put out the statement, that's not where it was going to end. And we knew that. And I think if you're at the Super Bowl and people are asking you about teams and young quarterbacks, it's just kind of natural to get caught up in that. And he tried to, he said plenty of times, I've always loved Northeast Ohio and how much it means to him. But I understand if you're a fan and he's, like I said, flirting with other teams, that would bother you. The thing that surprises me a little bit is, and I keep bringing it up, I really believe Myles Garrett loves to be loved. And it's hard for him. I think I don't know how much of this reaction he's getting. It's getting back to him. Is he paying attention to it? Is he, I don't know if he's in the area, if he's listening to talk radio, whatever. But he's a guy that's loved to be loved. And I think it would bother him if he really thought a significant part of the Browns fan base had turned against him.
All right, you picked the Eagles to win the Super Bowl. You are the man with the crystal ball. Is Myles Garrett on the Browns next year? What's the resolution here, Scott?
Yeah, this is really hard. You hate when I go it's 50-50, Chud. But I kind of feel like it's 50-50. But if you're going to make me pick, I'm going to say Myles Garrett is on the Browns in 2025.
Oh, okay. So weren't you like 55 to 45 that he was gone? So now are you switching it to 55-45 he stays?
I'm going 51-49 he stays.
51. All right. Okay. And I was 80-20 that he's gone. I'll go 70-30 that he's gone. And I always said I could see a scenario where he still stays. My issue is, I just think, what are the Browns supposed to say right now? Are they? They're making it seem like they're not going to trade him. They're making it seem like he'll be back. Well, what are they supposed to do? If they let anyone know they're going to trade him for sure, they're not going to get anything for him, or not anything, but they won't. I don't think they'll get the same value. They have to play this game. This is how it works. So I don't really buy into that as much, but I do see a scenario where if they really don't feel like they can get anything for him, they'll keep him, but then he can sit out and not play. So it could get ugly. So I'll dump it down to 70-30.
Fair enough. The only other thing I'll add on that is I don't think it's just a public thing from the Browns. I've talked to people with them and it's not, it's just conversation, and we're not trading Myles. So I do believe that is their stance. And again, that could change, but I don't think that's a bargaining. I don't think it's just to help drive up the trade market. I don't think their plan is not to trade him.
Yeah, and that might be their plan now, but that plan could change, like you just said. Exactly. Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. A few more things here to get to. You're going to be heading to the combine, correct?
That's the plan.
That's the plan. That's where you and Indianapolis go together like peanut butter and jelly. I know that. But anyway, so I guess just give me I don't really have a lot of questions for you on the combine, really. So I guess just you take the floor and give me your assessment of what you're looking for and what we should be looking for when it comes to the combine.
Yeah, it starts with it's a couple different things. I'll break it into, like, you have the Browns where they are, and then you have the draft stuff, which the Browns are huge in the draft. They're going to have probably 12 draft picks, depending on how the compensatory picks are awarded. So it's going to be a huge draft for them. I mentioned they have the number 2 pick. Everybody knows that. So you have that aspect of it. With you get to see all the draft prospects. They get to interview them. The media gets to interview them. Plenty of them will work out. I don't think we know yet if the top quarterbacks are going to throw there. But you have that aspect of the combine. You have all the medical tests. And then you have the Browns, where Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski will talk. And I believe I think one of them talks next Tuesday and one of them talks next Wednesday. And that, like I said, that's the first time they'll be asked about Myles Garrett since the trade request. And, I don't know if we'll get anything great from him, but we're going to pepper him with questions. And then it becomes, okay, what about where's Watson update? Is there a Nick Chubb update? Is there a JOK update? All the things you need to catch up on since the last time we talked to, these guys a month ago or more than a month ago. And then it shifts from, okay, you get a bunch of Browns questions those first 2 days. And then it shifts to the prospects. And it's, okay, how does Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward look? What do they talk when we get to talk to them? What do they say about their meetings with the Browns? We know Sanders, his first visit, because teams get to host 30 non-local draft prospects before the draft. And that window opens March 4th. And he said that his first visit is with the Browns. So you get that area of it. And then it's all the other guys. I mean, the Browns are picking, they're going to pick however many, it's called, double digits players in this draft in April. So you get the quarterbacks at the top. But what if they don't take a quarterback? So then it's Travis Hunter and Abdul Carter and the biggest names. And then that just filters down to, hey, I think the Browns need to get a young tight end. This is a great draft from all the analysts and experts. This is a great draft for tight ends. So I'm going to spend some time focusing on the tight ends and who might be there for the Browns, whether it's second round, third round, where could they take a tight end to pair with David Njoku and make that position stronger. And Njoku's contract is, I think it's coming up in a couple of years. And do they keep him? All those things. So it's really multifaceted how the combine goes. But that's it. It's going to be a lot about the Browns early and where they stand right now and, who they might re-sign and who they might let go, and a ton about Myles Garrett. And then it shifts to the draft prospects on and off the field.
Is there a player you're really looking forward to talking to or seeing the most?
Yeah, for me, it's a lot about the quarterbacks, Chud, because I think, and I want your opinion on this, I think they're going to take a quarterback at number 2. Whether it's Ward or Sanders, I've seen enough of them, and I'm going to continue to watch more film. But I've watched multiple games of both guys, and I think both are worth taking at number 2. I'm not saying they're, a sure thing. I understand they all have they both have flaws. I think they have enough potential, and the Browns need a quarterback, obviously, that I would take one of them at number 2. So I have a lot of focus on that. But who knows? Maybe they don't take one at number 2. Maybe they trade down a little bit. Travis Hunter is fascinating. Offense, defense, what does he say about that? How are teams viewing him? Do they see him more as a corner? Do they see him as a receiver? How do they feel can he play both? How many snaps is too much to expect from a guy in the league? I think he played 80-some snaps a game at Colorado. I don't think that translates to the NFL. I think you have to be more careful with one of their guys, especially if you take him at 1 or 2 or in the top 5. So maybe it's too simplistic, but a lot of my focus is going to be on those top guys because I do think they're all in play. While I say the Browns should draft or I think they will, and I think they should draft a quarterback at number 2, they could certainly either trade down or say, no, we're going to take Travis Hunter because he's the best player, or we're going to take Abdul Carter because he can be a dominant force at pass rusher, and then try to take a quarterback at 33 or whatever that situation is. So a lot of my focus will be on the biggest names at the combine.
All right. So you said you wanted to pick my brain on something.
Yeah. So what's your take on number 2, Chud? Are you quarterback, or do you kind of think like you don't love either of these guys to take another position, or just right now on February 20th, do you think the Browns wind up taking a quarterback at 2?
Yeah, it's so interesting. You bring up the trading, and I just always feel like that's always a potential with this team, this organization to do that. I feel like, all right, if you think that Myles Garrett's going to leave and you could get the next great pass rusher, well, then I start thinking, you know, that hasn't worked for us because we haven't had a quarterback.
All right.
And you just sit there and think, you don't have a lot of chances to get a top pick like that. Because you could still be a bad team and pick 5 or 6, and listen, you could find a quarterback at 5 or 6 or later. I'm not saying that, but I guess when you have an opportunity to get the best or second best quarterback in the draft, and you're a franchise starving to find a quarterback and haven't been able to do it, well, then I guess it would make sense to do it. I mean, they've tried all kinds of things and it hasn't worked, as we know.
Yep.
So I guess right now I would lean at taking a chance on one of those quarterbacks, but I agree. I don't know if they're both going to be a hit and that's going to save your franchise or not. I just wide receivers. I mean, yeah, of course you want to get the next great wide receiver, but I don't know if that's there either. So it just is there a can't miss? I don't know, Scott. I don't know if is there a can't miss in this draft?
Yeah, I mean, non-quarterback, I think Travis Hunter feels like one. I think Abdul
Okay.
Carter feels, and there is no such thing as a can't miss, but they feel like big-time players. But they play the wrong position. The position that matters the most, obviously, is quarterback, and you have to find that guy. And I think your odds of finding that guy are better at number 2 than anywhere else. Doesn't of course, there's a million cases where it's not right. Lamar Jackson was, I think, 31. Jalen Hurts was 53. But I think if you need a quarterback like the Browns do, and there's one there that you feel like can be a starting top, whatever, top 10, top 12 quarterback in this league, then you draft him. And so that's a decision that the Browns have to make. Do they feel like the guy that will be there at number 2? And who knows, Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders could go number 1. So you'd have to like both of them enough. If not, then that brings everything else into play. A trade down, taking Carter, taking Hunter. But let's assume they like both or that the Titans take a non-quarterback. I think you would have to hate both quarterbacks to not draft one at number 2, like the Kenny Pickett draft, right? Those guys were not worth taking. Kenny Pickett and then Malik Willis was the second quarterback taken, not into the 3rd round. I think Sanders and Ward are way above that. I think they fit into the Michael Penix, J.J. McCarthy, Bo Nix category from last year. I'd rank them below Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels, and I don't know a ton about Drake May, but those guys went 1, 2, 3 last year. So I think they're in that category. I think they're deserving of a first-round pick, a top 15 first-round pick, and if the Browns are number 2 and one's there, take them. But it is not without question, right? There's a lot of questions that go into that, but that's my bottom line feeling is if you like them, then it doesn't matter if they're not ranked number 2 on your board. If you like them and you like the potential and you can believe in them, take the quarterback at number 2.
Yeah, we just need to find the quarterback that changes the Browns, if that makes sense. Like,
Yes.
like not the quarterback that would fit in on a winning team, but on a losing team, like we could go back to Tim Couch, for example, never really had a shot with the expansion team like that. And I know that's maybe a little going one way on that, but I guess my point is that, you need to find that superhero quarterback that just changes the culture, because it's easy to be an okay quarterback and go on a good team and have success. But, what if you're a quarterback that has high expectations, but it just turns out you weren't able to win on a losing team?
Right.
And, we don't have Nick Chubb the way he was. It's questionable whether we have a number 1 receiver. You can have that debate. So, it's an offense that couldn't score 20 points a game.
Yeah.
So is that, you need someone to change that. And I don't know if anyone has the answer if these 2 guys are that, but again, I don't know if I have a real solid opinion on that. I think it's going to change more and more as I watch things unfold. And usually that's how it happens. which is funny because there's no games now, right?
Yeah,
It's the
right, right.
combine and just reading articles and people's opinions that kind of sways the jury, I think, a little bit. So I think I always find that interesting. But uh, so that pretty much that was I was going to ask you what you do at number two. So you've made that clear. How about the salary cap? How that the big jump in salary cap, does that help the Browns?
It does. Now, it helps everybody because it's league wide. But for a team that I'd say it's overthecap.com, who's really good at this. They had projected the Browns to be, I want to say, $38 million over the cap. And now with the jump, it goes down to their estimate is 24 million over the cap. And if you restructure Deshaun Watson's contract, which they've continued to do, and they are expected to do it again because they need to free up this cap space, that's 30 plus million dollars. So one move gets you under the cap, and then you can do it you can restructure other guys' contracts. You can cut players to free up cap space. So I think we're going to see those kind of maneuvers, but I would say the maneuvers don't have to be as drastic with such a high jump in the salary cap.
All right, Scott, before we end this, I have some news to share. Before I do that, football wise, what else, anything else you want to hit here?
No, I think we're good, Chud. It's all about the combine, and then that leads pretty quickly into free agency.
Yeah, there you go, free agency. So, I mean, there is always something to talk about, right?
There is.
There's always something. Well, speaking of this, I got to share some news, Scott. Unfortunately, this will be our last pod for a bit. I shared it on the news this morning on Go. Today was my final day of work at Channel 3 for, it could be up to 6 weeks. I've been dealing with a health issue, and turns out I found out I have prostate cancer, and I got to attend to it, and so I can get better and get back to work and get back to where I belong. It was definitely a shock. I'm 49 years old, but I'm going to talk about this a lot when I get back on the air at Channel 3. But on this platform now, if you're listening, and you're in your 40s, you're in your 50s, older than that, get your blood work done, get yourself checked out. Came as a complete surprise to me. I had no symptoms, and I tested high. I had my PSA level was higher than it should have been, and boy, if I don't get that test, if my doctor doesn't have me do that, I have no idea what the future might hold. I still don't know what the future holds, but I know that I at least know I have it. I have a plan of attack. I'm going to go into surgery next week, and I look forward to coming back and being better than ever. But, I miss talking to you for a few weeks, but I got to take some time off, and hopefully I'll be back in time, to talk before the draft.
Yeah, buddy, we're thinking about you, obviously. All the best to you. Take care with this rehab, and I don't think you have a good message. And it's something similar. I had found a melanoma, and I'd never been to the dermatologist. So, all those things. You just got to keep an eye on stuff and get checked because it's better to find out, right? So, I think that's a good message. I can't wait to talk to you again, Chud. I hope you're okay. If I might get a substitute fill in for a little bit so we can talk a little free agency between now and your return. But I can't wait till we do this again with you and you're back healthy and being back to doing everything you want to do.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You got to do what you got to do, and I mean, you might find someone much better.
Oh no, that doesn't seem possible, buddy. We have the chemistry. It goes back a long way.
We've been doing this a while. I'll miss you. I'll keep in touch with you though, and absolutely keep talking. But I'll be back in April.
Cool. Can't wait. Thanks for sharing that with us, Chud. Thanks for doing this, fitting in. I know you got a bunch of stuff going on, so I appreciate you getting this in. I thank everybody for listening. This has been another episode of the Zone Coverage Podcast, and you can read all my work at brownzone.com. Thanks.